Welcome to Godot Unscripted, a podcast in the Godot ecosystem. We are back again and in great form. Joining us today, it's Durrant, illustrator and game developer. Most well known in the Godot community for his game Garden Path, Louis has extensive experience in illustration and quite the path in game development as well. He's got a talent for storytelling and creating worlds. Louis, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great. I'm stoked to talk about Godot, talk about the game. Any excuse to just rattle off the top of my head. I'm always really excited. So thanks so much for inviting me on the podcast.
Thank you for being here. I'm happy to hear that. Was that introduction correct?
Yeah, all good.
Is there something you would like to add?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. Nice. I gave you quite the stalk on social media, so I would have the topics covered here.
No worries.
But I guess the first thing I just want to start out with is like, how is your art so good?
Oh, do you think so? I think, I was going through some old work recently, and I was just thinking, from maybe 2018, I was clearing up my Dropbox, and I think just being slightly on edge every time, and thinking, how can I make this a little better? It's a craft. It's something that I'm always looking to try and improve on. So thank you. That's really kind. But people always compliment the garden path. I think I spent, even now I'm not sure how happy I am with how it looks, but it seems to be well received. So I'm always working in that department and conscious of where there is room to improve. But thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the artist's curse, right? It could always be better.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I've never had an issue with finishing things. I usually know when to draw a line under something, but I think always moving on to the next thing and trying to figure out how I could do a little bit better, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a really rare skill. Would you mind telling me how you started in art? Were you always drawing?
Yeah, I was. When I was, we were growing up, it would be, when I was 5 or so. Maybe it's because I was the younger brother, but my brother would always have Player One controller on the Nintendo 64. And I would always be drawing. I'd be doodling on the floor. And, even back then I was, when you're a kid, you can't make games. But whenever I was drawing, I was very much inventing games. I was coming up with what I thought would be cool to be a game. And I think, illustration, I think my whole life has really just been a means to make games. I mean, it's had different avenues for me. But I think from as long as I can remember, that's the reason I've wanted to draw, and the reason I've wanted to improve my drawing and animation and to learn these things is to ultimately make my own games. I think because they were just so formative for me. I would watch my brother play the games, and there'd be these whole worlds, Ocarina of Time and things, and I just get so caught up in it and wanting to create my own thing. So I think that's really where it started. But yeah, I've been doodling my whole life.
And at what point did you start programming and making music?
Two very different answers. Programming's much more it depends how you define it. I was talking about this the other day, actually, how I made my first website when I was 10 or so, just because there are all these websites like Homestar Runner, Newgrounds, places. It was a real thing to sort of have a site where you could host art. And even though I've wiped all of that stuff clean because it was so crappy, but I really wanted to be part of the whole Flash animation scene. And so I did. I learned some HTML and eventually learned some CSS. So if that counts as programming, then I guess maybe in that regards. And I learned a little bit of JavaScript, a very small amount, some years later. But then it wasn't until really I got stuck in with Godot. I learned GD script was based on Python, so I spent a little bit of time practicing Python. And then, as with anything, I think just doing it every day, I think you learn a little bit more. You sort of, you make mistakes, you learn patterns. And so, I've been programming in GD script since 2018 now. On the music side, how long have I been doing music? I think, I started playing bass for a band in year 7, and so I learnt the bass just to be in a band, because there's an appeal, when you're a kid, I don't know, when you're a young lad, you want to be in a band. Maybe that's just me. But we had battles of the bands and stuff, and my mates were in bands, and so I learnt the bass guitar. I never got very good. I'd love to, before I die, I'd love to be able to play the bass guitar a bit better. But and then another friend said, forget that band, join my band. And then we started writing songs together, and then we wanted to record songs. And I remember we were like, well, don't most people just put a microphone in the corner of a room and just start recording? And then we realised that sounded terrible. And so through that, I think the two of us learnt a lot about music production. And then probably about 10 years ago, I started writing just my own sort of angsty guitar stuff, and singing and all that. And, which it was... nobody needs to hear, but I learned so much.
I need to hear
it. Well, good luck finding it. But I learned about EQing and compression and all that kind of fun stuff. And eventually I realised that there's so much more with soundtracking. You can do dissonant chords, you can do strange time signatures and things. Not everything has to make sense when you're kind of creating more of a world and experience. So I really lent into that, and it was a way to really set the tone for the game that you're working on. I think music is a fantastic way of just getting in the right headspace, and it's always been one of the things I work on first. Whenever I start a new project, I'll find those right chords and I'll write those down.
Oh my god, a lot of the terms I don't even know. It sounds like you have quite a bit of experience, and what I do want is to hear that music.
I'm Jack of trades, master of none. I think it's all. I'm always anxious when people hear the Garden Path soundtrack, because I know the absolute basics of these music production things, but I just do what sounds good to my ears and just see where it goes from there.
Yeah, the good thing is that you're a storyteller, right? So you have good taste in all areas. So what sounds good to your ears is then good for everyone else.
I hope so. I mean, I've always, I'm a little bit of an audiophile. I like music a lot. When you're into illustration, you've got to fill the silence with something. So just over time, I think I like to think I'm a music fan, a music collector, and so I think just listening closely to your favorite music, I think teaches you a lot about what you can do with your own music. So it's a great place to start.
I agree. +1. I mean, my wife would disagree about me since I've been trying to sing for 20 years. I still can't hit a note on purpose, but someday.
Yeah. I mean, everything you can learn. There's people willing to teach, and there's stuff online. So never too late to start, I think.
That's true. You mentioned you started learning programming with GD Script in Godot in 2018. But what about Crossing to the Cold Valley and Kingdom Come, the other two games you have?
Yeah, so they were made in a bit of software called Visionaire Studio, which is something that I picked up. I made both of the projects at university, sort of preliminary versions of them anyway. It would be after university I sort of scrubbed them up and released them to the public. But that was done through kind of visual coding, through logic, I suppose. It was very, lots of ifs and elses, which kind of, I think was a good way to introduce me to that way of thinking, to sort of understand variables without having to do the syntax and everything. But after those games, I really wanted to learn a real, I'm not sure what the term is, but a multi-purpose game engine, I guess, because Visionaire Studio I think is a great engine. I mean, Deponia, I think, was made in Visionaire Studio, which did quite well. But it's for adventure games, really. It's for point-and-click adventures. So, and you can make it do all kinds of things. But I wanted to learn a multi-purpose engine and start designing my own systems and things like that. And it was right at that time in 2018. I think Godot 3 had just come out, so it was a really good candidate to get stuck in, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm impressed that you say that these two projects, you began working on them in uni, and then you released them eventually. Were there many other unreleased projects that you had, or has everything you've worked on been released?
Oh, in terms of games, I think, I've never been... I know there's like a trope online about game developers, or indie game devs at least, want to keep starting new projects, but I think...
Yes, sir.
I think I've never... I think through that Flash animation, when that was a big thing, I mean, I started, and even then, when I was like 10 or 11, 12, I made so many of these crappy little Flash games. And you'd put them down and you'd never pick them back up again. But I think eventually you finish one and then you put it online and then you see that feedback coming in and you go, oh, wow, like if I finish something, people play it, they watch it, and then they respond to it. And so I think I got, instead of getting addicted to the feeling of starting something new and fresh, I think started getting addicted to that feeling of finishing something and getting feedback. And I think that's, again, it's just something that I learned very gradually over time. And so, yeah, I mean, it's crazy that, I started the Garden Path I started writing ideas for it in 2017, started working on it in 2018, and I just didn't work on anything else until, well, I'm still basically the only thing I'm working on. So, every project's been a little bit bigger. I'm hoping the next one won't be 6 years, 7 years long. That's the plan. It was never the plan from the start to be that long.
That's how it goes, right? But that's such a rare skill. I want you to know that I have around 40 projects. It really is a trope, but it's true for a reason. But that skill you have, I think it's what makes you, or has made you, so successful so far. And I say like success in quotes, but to me it looks like you're successful because you're publishing things, you have your content out there, and you're able to keep developing games.
Yeah, for sure. I hope so. I'll keep working on the Garden Path until people stop buying it. I don't know whether that'll be in a year or whether that'll be next week. But it's been great having the feedback so far, and it is a game that I want to foster, and I want to, I didn't just learn Godot, and I didn't learn so much about game development with it, but I think learning so much about fostering a community and listening to the feedback and sort of what people do respond well to, what people don't respond well to. I think that's it's all part of the learning process, I guess. And if it's not the Garden Path, then it'll be whatever I work on next.
That sounds interesting. Could you go a little bit more into detail on what people respond well to and what they do not respond well to?
I think, well, the Garden Path really was. It is a niche project. I think maybe it presents itself as quite accessible. I think, which it is. But I think, growing up, I really enjoyed these games that you got lost in. And you sort of, back in the day, I'd play these remember my dad had this big box of CDs of these old DOS games, and you just put them in the computer, and then just like, as a kid, I would just figure out how they worked. I think that was part of the fun. And definitely with the Garden Path, I wanted to create that sense of like, just drops you in the world, and then, you just walk around, you see what happens, you explore. And, I think a big part of the challenge, a lot of people have felt lost and they've been unsure what to do, which I've always felt is sort of, is kind of a good problem, because it shows that people do want to play the game, they want to be in that world, but they're not necessarily certain which way to go. And so I think, I haven't wanted to necessarily design, solve that through holding hands more, but just kind of giving hints, giving suggestions. So it's been tricky, but obviously people have been really nice about the artwork and everything, but just trying to make it, because I'm not trying to make a weird niche game that only 5 people, including myself, enjoy. I do want it to be something a lot of people can engage with, and maybe it is an old school design philosophy, but keeping both camps happy, because at the same time there have been people who they say, oh, finally a game that I can take at my own pace, I can explore. I love that it doesn't tell me everything up front. I get that sense of joy when I figure out something myself. So, and if everything was given to you on a plate, then I don't know, you'd lose something there as well. So it has been a design challenge. It's one I'm still working on today. It's something I'm, even this week I'm drawing up plans. But I think that's been the key thing in terms of feedback, at least on the, what could be improved.
Absolutely. You can't please everyone, right?
No.
Some people, want to be told everything, so to speak, and others just want to discover it themselves. I'm more of a discover it myself type of thing. Yeah. And when my hands are restricted, or when I have to go at somebody else's pace, I lose my goddamn mind.
And then there is also the thing of like, I fall into this where a game sort of says, it gives you the option, do you want to go in blind or do you want guides? And I'll find I often, just because I'm lazy, I'll opt for the guides, but then I don't realise what I'm missing out on. So sometimes when you give people the shortcuts, they'll just take them and they won't realise that actually maybe they would have had a better experience. It's like those old dungeon games where, or there've been some more recent ones where they give you the option if you want to map out the dungeons, pencil and paper. And you see these, and I've given it a go, and it's so much more fun. It's a much more engaging experience. But like off the bat, when you're just told, do you want to go to the trouble? I think your gut reaction is to pick the sort of the easy route. Not to say that.
I know what you mean. So, you need to know yourself and what experiences you enjoy, and even then, it's different playing a game right after, I don't know, a 10-hour demanding shift of mental work versus on the weekend, right? You pick different experiences for the level of engagement you want.
Absolutely, yeah. And I have hoped, because my past couple of games have been very much not the kind of game you want to play after a day's work. They're very kind of, you're reading, you're paying attention, there's themes. And I sort of wondered, I think part of my reason for designing the garden path was something where I could express sort of similar ideas in these sort of more abstract games, but in a way that you could just sort of not turn your brain off necessarily, but it's accessible, it's digestible, it's something you feel like you can just hop into and experience at any time.
I like that. Jumping to another topic, I wanted to ask you, when you started development on the garden path, was this a full-time deal, or were you doing it on the side from your job?
Yeah, good question. It was very much just a side thing for a long time. I always think about, not to say I've forgotten the author of Sherlock Holmes, but I remember he was a dentist, I think, and he would write Sherlock Holmes when nobody came in to get their teeth checked up. And so I feel like the garden path was similar. So I had my illustration business, and then when there wasn't any work to do, I didn't just want to kick back and play World of Warcraft or something. I thought, well, I got to be filling this time with something productive. And so that was, learning Godot, learning programming, building the garden path ultimately. And then over time, that ratio, I always kept a bit of freelance going just so I could sometimes, you've just been working on the same thing for so long, just being able to shut that down and just work on something else. I really need that in my workflow, I think. But very much so, the garden path became my full-time work, yeah.
When did that focus switch? Was this with the Kickstarter?
Ooh, I'd say it was, probably with the Kickstarter. I mean, I didn't see any of the Kickstarter money. I just want to that went all into, because, I basically bootstrapped so much of the game. It went mostly into localization, and we had someone on that worked on the game. They helped with the multiplayer. Shout out Callum McKay, he does great work, and so that helped for a year or so. We got all those things wrapped up, but then then it was mostly me running on my freelance my freelance pocket. But and I suppose over time, I'm not sure. I think it definitely ramped up. I think 2023. Was probably when I was working. 2023, 2024. It probably went into fully full time.
Yeah, that's crazy because I saw the Kickstarter campaign and I've always been quote unquote afraid of it due to the level of commitment and work it requires, especially when you promise rewards that are non-digital.
I think I'm trying to think with the rewards. I mean, we got my mum to do a load of ceramic models, which was good fun, but that was some work off my plate. And then we did the book, which I think was well received, but it was a lot. It was artwork from the game, and I studied at university how to design a book, so I was hoping I could put that to good use. So I enjoyed doing it, and so it all kind of came together with sort of bits and pieces that I'd already. I'd already worked on for the game, or if I hadn't, it could eventually find its way into the game anyway. But I had a good team. It wasn't just me. To stress, the publishing team over at Player 2. I think they're now Mooncat Games. 10 or so people really helping pull the strings and get things shipped. Although I did have, for the longest time, I had boxes and boxes of these books and pins and just next to me, and it was good. I only shipped them out recently. Actually, they had loads of stock for ages. But anyway, that's a story for another time.
Yeah. So the publisher found you, or you found them before this happened?
I found them. Yeah. They had worked on. Oh, I've gone blank. Eastshade, game about painting. And Eastshade wrote a very glowing review of them in an article. And so I thought it's a similar kind of game. It's a, go at your own pace kind of game. So they just seemed like the right people to work with. So I reached out to them, and then they suggested publishing the game rather than being just working on the PR. So I think it worked out on all sides.
Yeah, it did. With the support that they offered you and how you talk about them, it seems that they really did help you out quite a bit, which is really nice.
Yeah, no person is an island. I think there's this view of sort of indie game dev. There's this glorification of the solo dev. But anytime anything happened was when I reached out to someone. So please don't just sort of, just as a general thing to the world, don't be an island and talk to people. I mean, like we're doing now, I suppose, because, you build up connections. And this was only something I learned, when I finally, made it my New Year's resolution to start contacting people to get the game more out there. So yeah, and I think I wouldn't have been able to certainly promote the game without the help of the people over in publishing. So
yeah, it's so true what you're saying, right? It's one of the hardest things I think you have, especially nowadays. You have so many objectives or goals you want to fulfill. You want to be productive as well, and in there not only come interpersonal relationships, but building them up and networking, so to speak. And it's finding the time to do that.
And I didn't realise this. It was only last year I started going to these events, and it turns out they all have like free pizza and free beer. So,
what?
Well, a lot of them do. And I just started getting invited to all these places, and they, because they want you to go. So, just a word out there: if you can find networking events, it's kept me fed for a few days anyway.
You'll sign me up. Is that the UK pizza?
Usually, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, most of these places just you'd go and you wouldn't have to buy dinner that night.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. I need to check that out. Here, there's no pizza.
Really?
We need to step it up in our local community in Berlin. Yeah.
Can't believe it.
Right. That's a perfect segue because I wanted to ask you. You mentioned that you'll stop working on it when people stop buying it. But do you have more or less a horizon that you know what's coming? What are the next few updates? What could be the end?
If there is an end, it's probably not going to be flashy. I think. I imagine that it's something. I mean, I even update my other games every now and then. Keep them working. If someone is just playing the game and notices something, there's no reason I couldn't just push a quick update. But no, we've got a roadmap internally anyway. I've got things I'd love to add. I mean, we've done so many cool things. We've localized and everything, so the work is there. I just need to kind of get all the mechanics done, quests and things, character storylines. I do want to focus more on gameplay elements at the moment, just because of what I discussed earlier with the just giving people more of something to latch on to, I suppose, for those who want that. I think that's my next goal. But then, and then hopefully if that does well, then we can start looking at getting those character storylines more fleshed out, and because I think people do really like the characters, and I think giving more excuses to learn more about them, I think folks would really enjoy that. Yeah,
I agree with that. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask you about your streaming career.
Oh.
Is this like how should I put it? Was this for the game specifically, or is it something you do for fun? I often see that you stream drawings or art for the game just casually and with someone else as well, like sort of hangout. Seems very nice.
It's something we started doing. I'm not even sure why. When we started it, along with the Kickstarter, I think it used to be with Fern. We did that for years and years, every other week. And we've had folks come and go. We've had different. It's always been me because I guess that's the focus. And currently it's just me. We're sort of trialing that as more of a, making them more low key, more often. I don't know if I'd call it a career. I think I've made a total of about $1.29 so far. I think from the whole thing.
Let's go.
Let's go. Yeah, but I remember talking to someone at publishing, and they said, "Oh, we never would have carried that on." But people kept showing up and seemed to enjoy what I was doing. So I'm gonna keep doing it for a little while and see if people enjoy it. I feel, different ways about it because I am historically, as a solo dev, I've always been quite isolated as a person. So it feels unusual kind of bringing people into the creative process. Or even just like, putting a camera on what I'm doing. I come and go on how I feel about that. But it is something that comes with, the whole reason we had Fern join me in the beginning was to just grease the wheels, I suppose, on how, having that camera on me, it takes the edge off, I suppose, having someone else there to talk to. But yeah, I'll see how it goes. I do enjoy it. And I'd like to expand it out, do some more art, I'd love to do some coding as well, but I find my brain just stops working whenever I have to do some debugging, and I've got the stream running. I'm not sure why that is. I think some part of my brain can't do both at the same time. So which I think a lot of people have said, oh, we'd love to see the how you go through the code and debug and stuff like that. But I think for now, art works best, and I think it is more accessible. So.
It's always like that. Art is, so it's easy to digest and it's very pretty to see. Yeah. But code, for example, if no one else has the context, it's hard for them to get into it. Not only that, but when you're debugging, for sure, you probably have the main script, the signal that it's calling, another script, all in your head, and you're tracking them to see where the bug comes from. And then it's like hard to communicate these things.
It's crazy how on any other day, I immediately know where everything is linked and everything. But as soon as there's any expectation on me to start performing, I guess it's just falls out of my brain. So
drooling on the keyboard.
Literally, yeah. That was I did it once. It was a bad stream. I'll just say that. Yeah. No drooling.
God. No drooling. Okay. Wait. I need to gather myself. I wanted to ask you how the idea for the garden path came to be. So how did you brainstorm this, and how has it been adding content? Do you have a process where you just come up with ideas, or is it more it came to me in a dream?
How did it come about? I think, funnily enough, back in 2017, I think there was, maybe I don't want to say a gap in the market, but I feel like there weren't that many quote unquote cozy games. Even the concept of a cozy game didn't really, I think we had Stardew Valley must have been out a year or so at that point. Which I guess kind of jolted the whole thing. But I do remember thinking, this was a few years before. Is it New Horizons, the Animal Crossing game? The new one?
I think so. I'm not
sure.
So.
Horizon something. I totally forgot. But yeah, and I just remember thinking there wasn't really that experience on Linux, at least, or on the PC, even on the PC. And I just sort of started, these were games I really grew up with and I really loved, and these sort of smell the roses kind of games. With Stardew Valley, I really wanted to like it more, but I think I never quite engaged with the farming element. I know some people say, "Oh, why are these cozy games all capitalism simulators?" Which isn't, it's not necessarily what I was thinking. But I think it maybe verbalizes the same thought. I don't really want to be constantly crafting, constantly designing systems to sort of relax. Sometimes I just want to be in this space, and so I think that was a big part of it. And I think the game still stands as, I don't know if there are as many cozy games or even games in that zone that sort of don't expect you to farm, because a lot of people do assume, and again this goes with expectations. I think people think, or even list the Garden Path as a farming game, and I think I really wanted it to not be a farming game. I didn't want every day you wake up and you have to water all of your plants. I wanted it to be this sort of curation experience where you design your garden, but you're not harvesting it, you're not exploiting it. It's just it's this sort of constant. It's a work in progress, but it's like a zen. It's a zen kind of garden. It's something that that you're not you're not turning over every single week or every single day. So yeah, I think that's. I guess that's sort of where it came about. I also remember thinking that it was I wish, I wish I could tell myself in the past, but I remember thinking it'd be quite a simple game because I thought, the programming won't be too bad because it'll just be a sort of walk up, press A on things game, which it largely is. But and I sort of thought, well, I can lean into my strengths because content will be drawings, right? It'll be characters, which I can draw. It'll be furnishings, which I can draw. It'll be clothing, which I can draw. So I can focus more on that than the programming, which, of course, is a very naive outlook, but at least that is what I was thinking at the time.
Famous last words. That's how it always starts, right? And
absolutely.
You had a beautiful thought, which is not the capitalism simulator, but the farming altogether, that a lot of these games build you, or not build you, like give you these habits where you are forced to do something or to play optimally or better.
Yeah.
And that's part of what I find positive about your game and other games, where they just give you this freedom and there's quote unquote no way to play it wrong, right?
Yeah.
You're discovering a world and you don't have these daily quests or login bonus or whatever. Of course, I'm talking about other things, but the experience is largely the same. You don't have to do these things. You can do what you want and you will still be playing optimally, so to speak, since you're having fun.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also that the day-to-day experience, I think, was important because I didn't want people to feel like it would be a negative to load into the game, like, oh, everyone's angry that you haven't been looking after your garden, there's weeds now, or you're insolvent or something, I wanted it to be like, really, you've just put it down, but you've come back and things have moved on, but it's okay, everything's still there. Things have grown, if anything, so you're almost encouraged not to come back every day. And I think there was definitely a design. I mean, I'm still sort of struggling with this, but I didn't want dailies because I know people sort of, they don't want to feel like they're missing out. But at the same time, you do want something. Since the game is so much about the day to day, you want something to encourage. To make feeling like playing is worthwhile at least each day. So without feeling like, yes, this is something you have to do, and if you're not doing every day, then you're missing out on some streak, some combo of progress. I think, which maybe makes the game less addictive, but I'm hoping sort of makes it more approachable, sort of at the same time.
Yeah, you have some very interesting thoughts about art, game development, and music altogether. And you have a devlog where you've expressed some of these thoughts. Could you tell me a little bit about your devlog?
Oh, I feel like I haven't updated that in... I think I did one where I remember feeling really bad that we delayed the game again, and I think that's the latest post. That could have been over a year ago now. That was good fun though. I think it was very much about me learning about Godot and figuring things out. And I think it worked better back then because I was making so many game design decisions. I think a lot of which, I've just still carried on with me. And I think there also was that sense of, as you're learning to build games, I remember when I got the water shader working and it just felt like such an aha moment, or, just these little moments that you figure something out and it's actually quite a novel way of doing things. I think that felt really fun to share. And I do, at the time it felt like nobody was reading it, but I do still get people who, message me every now and then going, oh, I really enjoyed your devlog when you used to publish those, or some people even go back and still read it. So it was offline for a while, maybe even a year or so. And so I just made it, up with the latest post on there, which again could have been a year or so. But I just wanted to make it my mission that at least it's online, it's there to use. Even if I'm not keeping it updated, there's still a record of it, because I think it does sort of capture that sort of naive, bright-eyed game designer that I was all those years ago.
You just walk up and press A. It's that easy. Yes.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's a great segue into the next topic as well, because you mentioned in the devlog you would talk about Godot. What made you choose Godot as an engine?
I've always had this I've admired people who work in Blender, because I feel like even though it's this if anyone's ever used Blender for the first time, it's just stuff isn't where you think it would be. Right click doesn't do what you think it would do. It's this weird sort of, it has its own philosophy, but I've always kind of admired people who, even despite of that, they've been with it for so long and it's so natural to them. And so I sort of realised I was in this unique position, having just finished up my other two games, and I was looking for a new engine. I thought, well, I'm not comfortable with anything. I'm not used to anything. So maybe now is a good time to sort of not worry about usability or, usability or... I can't think of the second one.
What do you mean? Like how it appears? Visuals?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, or how quick it is to learn. That's what I mean. So, how quick it is to pick up. Because I've got time. I can learn. These engines. Like if I was learning Blender, that's what at that time I would have learned. And so, yeah, Godot was just released their 3.0. I had it bookmarked along with a couple other engines, which I think, funnily enough, have disappeared now, or they've not become as relevant. So I think I definitely got lucky. Because Godot has done so well in the last few years, and it's the same game project that I've been working on ever since I started it back in 2018. It's the same project file and everything, and it's worked with me through all these versions of Godot, and I've loved working in it, and it's I work spend hours in it now. So I suppose I am sort of some kind of I just love working in Godot. Yeah, it feels like home now, even though it was so daunting at the time. When you load it up for the first time, you got no idea what you're looking at. But being open source as well, I wanted something that I knew down the line. Even if nobody's keeping the engine going, maybe there would be some community effort to keep the design files going, or something like that. There'd be some kind of effort for compatibility. Which I've always liked the idea of, and there's no licenses as well, which is always a plus. So yeah, I think at the time it felt like the right thing to do, and I love open source projects. I use Krita for my illustrations. I try and use Linux where I can. So it's just I want to support open source where I can. I want to learn open source where I can. It's always been ever since I was a kid. I've always wanted to install Linux on computers and things. I'd walk around with a thumbstick. People would tell me to stop, but so yeah, no, Godot was a natural fit, and I don't regret a second of it.
I love to hear that. Open source for life.
Absolutely.
Did I hear correctly that you say you use NixOS?
Oh no, I didn't say Nix. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you misheard.
Oh, okay. Oof. No, I was scared there for a second. I'm a NixOS hater. No, I'm kidding. Just for the fun of it.
Which one's NixOS? I've definitely heard of it.
It's like this snowflake. It looks like a snowflake.
Because this might be... Because I use Silverblue, the Fedora one, which I think... Is NixOS immutable? Is that what they still call it?
I'm not sure. I really don't know anything about
okay.
code.
I thought...
Sounds like you know way more than me.
Oh, no worries. Sorry.
I see you bookmarked it for later. Continuing on, throughout this journey that you've recounted, I'm wondering, what do you feel is the biggest challenge you've faced so far?
Biggest challenge? Definitely was getting the game onto the Nintendo Switch, which isn't necessarily... I don't want to put people off, because, I mean, the where Godot is now compared to when I started, there's so many more tools and things available and people willing to do the work, and, the work's been done. So I think, Godot's never been in a better place to think about Nintendo Switch, and I think that's only going to get better. I don't know anything about the Switch 2, but I'm assuming it's going to be... it's going to use a lot of what the original Switch used, and I think Godot is going to be in a good place for that. But in terms of performance, in terms of compatibility, in terms of reaching out to the right people, just figuring out what you can and can't do, I think, and it was a real challenge. I think, getting the game to run, the game as it is on the Switch is the same experience. Bar some UI changes as the game you get on the PC. It runs at 30 frames a second instead of 60, but, it was really important to me that the game has this, the full garden that streams in, seamlessly, that all loads in, and it, that was such a huge challenge building the game, let alone getting it optimized on the Switch. And I think, with the garden path, every single plant, every single bit of foliage, every single tree, flower is its own completely interactable node. It has its own data, it has its own status, it grows every time.
Oh, Jesus.
And so the game is calculating, how healthy that plant is, how much shade it has, which is, it's not something that's immediately obvious. I know a lot of people think when they load into the game that there's just this sort of one garden. They don't realise that it is this kind of randomly generated, these parcels of land that it's sort of all pieced together with these, and it's using these parcels to load in these fully interactive trees and foliage and everything. So getting that all up and running on the Nintendo Switch, I think, was a real achievement. There was definitely this moment because, we'd done the Kickstarter campaign, and I think one of our stretch goals was Nintendo Switch, and I think years later, I think I finally got it running, just loaded into the starting zone, and I think the game was running on like 2 frames a second, and I just had my head in my hands. I was like, I'm a fraud. I've lied to all these people. I was a real panic, and just over time, I think talking to the right people, optimizing things in the right way. Finally got it. Haven't got it to 60 yet, but I've got it. It runs at like, without the cap, I think it runs at like 50, but it sort of, comes and goes. So, keeping it, I think 30 frames a second. I think a lot of Switch games run at 30, and it's not like you're doing Twitch reflexes. It's a walk up, press A on things game. So
exactly.
I think it's fine, and maybe Switch 2, maybe we'll have the specs and things to, maybe it'll be an even better fit. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Ooh, all right. Hope it has a Radeon 5700. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Fingers crossed.
What was preparing for the release like? It sounds like you developed very sustainably, at a good pace. But I want to hear what the release was like. Was that also stressful, or was it you just made it available for everyone one day and you already had a build that worked up on Steam?
Hard to say. I mean, the most stressful, bar none, period was just after release. That was horrible. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but it was kind of my own doing, really. Just because suddenly you have, you went from 2 or 3 people playing the game from Kickstarter to suddenly thousands of people playing the game, and everyone's got their own opinions, and everyone's running into so many new bugs, and and it suddenly dawned on me that it was me managing the Linux release, the PC release, the Switch release, and they all have their own bugs and own deployment pipelines and everything. And I suddenly, dawned on me that I was the only guy. So I sort of was like, what have I done? But, it was a challenge, and I overcame it ultimately. I've come out the other side. So, I was maybe too calm leading up to release. I'm not sure. I think I've always kind of had that outlook, though. I was always just get some good sleep. Do what you can. I've always had the philosophy that, if every day you feel like you've done what you can, then that's all you can do, And so, I think we had a release date. I met with publishing, and they were like, we think this date would be good. And so I just had to make sure everything was ready to go by then. There wasn't maybe every feature that I wanted, but we delayed the game enough that I think I had a lot in the game that I was really happy with the way, at least in terms of the features that were in there. I was really happy with how it was looking. And we did test the game internally, and I playing the game every day. But there's only so many bugs you can capture, really. And I think suddenly when you have so much more feedback, so. Yeah, lead up to the release, not so bad. Actual release, hell on earth. But I think I'm in a better place as a result, so I can't complain too much.
Forged to the flames. I'd love to hear
exactly.
that. What's your favorite thing about the game, looking back or looking today?
Oh, my favorite thing.
Or what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I think what I was mentioning before about the interactability of all the plants and everything. I think I'm proud of leaning into the natural environments as much as I could. I was learning a lot about taxonomy and different plants and how they all relate to each other. And because I think so many games, they sort of give you a tree and they're just like, that's a an oak tree or something, and that's sort of the beginning and end of it. And I wanted to learn about, what kind of funguses grow on trees, what kind of what trees are related to one another, what kind of there's all these different trees that you can have, not just I feel like every game it's just like oak, pine tree, birch tree. I mean, to be fair, we've Garden Path's got all of those, but I just wanted to lean in. A game with bracken and things. These things that you do find in woods everywhere, but is always sort of missing. I'm happy to have that sort of be a core part of the game. To sort of and I've had people who they love foraging in the woods, and they love camping, and they've said that the game really brings them into that world, along with the sort of fantasy aspects and the inspiration from pagan and Celtic cultures and things like that. So I'm again, I do feel like the game stands on its own in that regard. I think it's always funny that fish are always, in games, fish are always these very specific species of bass that you go out and catch. But then the plants themselves are always just sort of rows, or I don't know. There's always only so few, and so I wanted to flip that on its head a bit, I guess. Also, just a little thing. I'm really proud of the fishing in the game. Just the way that the fish, they're not conventional. I wanted a way, because I knew fishing would be a big part of the game, but I wanted every sort of aspect of the game to relate to all the other aspects. I wanted everything to connect, and so I had this missing link of fishing and gardening, and so I sort of had this idea that the fish themselves, each of them have a song, and so you catch the fish and then you can release that song into the garden, and that song will heal your plants, or it will grow some plants, or it will harvest some plants for you. So it's this way to if you enjoy fishing, you can very much, and people do, you can do so much of the gardening mechanic through fishing in a way. And so I'm very proud of that. It's just like a small little design decision that I think sort of just streamlines the game experience. And again, to what you were saying, it gives every play style a validity.
Nice. I need to pay more attention when I try this next time. I have one last question.
Of course.
What advice would you give for those watching out there? Whether it's Godot, game development, or just life in general?
Finish some projects, put them out there, get used to releasing things, reach out to people, do a little bit every day. I really believe that. I mean, there's nothing... I kind of view everything that I do as work. I don't particularly enjoy drawing very much, but it's an avenue to creating game sprites, which ultimately, what I really enjoy is seeing my game running, is entering that world that I wanted to create. And, if I just drawing a little bit every day, I didn't really get good at drawing until I started making it my job, until I started saying, every day I'm going to, whether it's freelance or not, I'm going to be working on something, I'm going to be drawing something. And I think that's really how you improve. Don't get so caught up on these big lofty goals, start working on something really small. And just, get used to releasing it, putting it out there, getting feedback. And you can't get feedback unless you reach out to people. So I think that's where the heart of it all lies.
Nice. And that's a good note to end on. Please, Louis, plug your stuff. Where can we follow you? Where can we support you? Where can we buy your game?
You can buy the game on Steam, on itch.io, and then it's also on Nintendo Switch. I think there's a sale on... I'm not sure when this episode will go out, so I better not say anything.
Yeah, better not say that.
That's okay. But give it a wish list, and then you can see when it goes on sale. If you want to follow me, I'm on Mastodon, mastodon.art. I'm L Durrant. On Blue Sky, I'm louisdurrant.art. If you want to follow the game's progress, the team posts on social media with @FromCarrotCake, so that's the name of the studio, is Carrot Cake. That's on TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, anywhere you can imagine. So give that a follow. I think that's got to be everything. We've got a Discord. We chat about the game there. If people want to say hi to me, I'm online on Discord all the time, looking at bug fixes and things. So reach out, send me an email. My website is louisdurrant.art. I'd love to hear from anyone. I really enjoy reading emails.
Nice. Thank you so much for your time, Louis.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And thank you to everyone who stopped by to listen today. This was Godot Unscripted. Cue free.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, I've done I think one other podcast before, so it's really get caught up in it. I like this software. Is this open source?
No, I was looking for one that was open source, but this like the guy who has it is like very very open source friendly. It's got a Discord. It's very cheap. He provides immediate support on Discord. I don't know. It's just like a really cool guy, and I just liked it by the way how they sell themselves.
Is that a little ferret in the corner? I thought that was your avatar at first.
No.
He's like watching the.
It's a ferret. Yeah, it's called eCaster, Caster. It's got a weird name, as all like niche software does. No marketability, but I can recommend it. It's just that if you're running Linux, you might run into audio issues sometimes. Just Linux things. Sure. But he's working on fixing those.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Are you?
So you've started the?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
You've been podcasting 3 months now. Was it October? I saw was your first episode.
Yeah, more or less. It's not a lot. I don't think I'm the. How do you say that? The content I produce is that good yet. It could be way better, but I need to work on improving it. But it's like I wouldn't say it's a part-time job. It's like a quarter of a part-time job, but it's still like finding the time, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the recording, the planning, and then actually editing takes me like 3 hours per podcast. More or less.
It's a whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like finding the time, then with the game, then with exercising, hobbies. You know how it is.
How is finding people to talk to?
At the beginning, it was quite difficult, and I got rejected very often. So I wanted to start the podcast already middle of last year, and just nobody was open to it. Like, no shit on anyone. Like, I understand if you get contacted by a rando with no credentials. Yeah, it makes sense to just be like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And so when I attended GodotCon, that gave me the opportunity to talk to a lot of developers and tell them like, hey, how you doing? I'm actually a real person, not some shady dude. And just talk with them and then like propose. They commented the podcast for one of the first few episodes. And once the ball got rolling and people enjoyed the podcast, it was easier to contact them.
Oh, that's really good that that's worked out then, yeah.
Yeah. You're a fan of right? You like going to the woods, mushrooms?
I wish, since I live in the city, I don't get so many opportunities, but...
okay. I mean, I also love nature. Don't get into nature that often, but just from hearing how you spoke about the game, plants, fishes, I'm like, oh my God, mushroom buddy? I love mushrooms.
Do you forage mushrooms?
I want to forage them. I have grown them by myself, like those starter kits for lion's mane. And I have pills for like turkey's tail and all this stuff because they're super good, supposedly. But yeah, I really love mushrooms altogether. They're amazing.
I really like, I love mushrooms. But I've never, I want to start that journey. I want to see if I can, forage something. Would you recommend growing them yourself?
Yes, it's expensive if you're just constantly buy them. But if you decide to propagate them, it's cheaper. But it will take you more time.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
Always the balance.
Yeah, sure. Is there like because I really like the flavor of mushrooms, but I feel like I really want find a mushroom that like has a really like pungent flavor. So I don't know if there's anything that comes to mind.
They're also different. Like they're all pungent in their own way. And it depends what you're into, but I would propose lion's mane.
Lion's mane. I'll look into it.
Yeah, it's also supposed to help your brain regenerate dead neurons and dead connections.
Oh, mad.
Yeah, so it doesn't make you smarter, it just helps with that, right? Maybe it restores some bad connections
brain health.
and makes you addicted to brain rot, but that's just another thing.
Okay.